1 Summary July 28, 2022 1 Summary 1.1 The essence. If a psychologist or a philosopher asked themselves what lies between the gaps of what can be understood scientifically and phenomenologically about the mind. The mind, according to physical reductionists, is just a representation of something within the brain. The mind, however, is more of a relational process, as the text contends, and it cannot exist outside of its capacity to enact meaning for itself. The embodied mind advances cognitive science research in the direction of a more emergent and complexity-focused approach to thinking about the mind. Cognitive science must combine the broader knowledge of cognition as an expression of our brain within a bigger space that includes both the body and the environment when intellectual borders are crossed. Existence as we know it can be viewed as a network composed of functionally connected hierarchically modular relationships that feed back within and between scales. 1.2 The Embodied Mind Journal Entry Notes. This is my book summary of The Embodied Mind. My notes are a reflection of the journal write-up above. Written informally, the notes contain a mesh and mix of quotes and my own thoughts on the book. Sometimes, to my own fault, quotes are interlaced with my own words. Though rest assured, I am not attempting to take any credit for the main ideas below. The journal write-up includes important messages and crucial passages from the book. I wrote few thing on my journal while listening this book. Some idea come up. There's a stinging understanding of how distant humans are from actual overt reality in most cases. I believe this is due in part to our disconnection from our body's introspective network of sensations. The new sciences of mind need to enlarge their horizon to encompass both lived human experience and the possibilities for transformation inherent in human experience. Ordinary everyday experience, on the other hand, must enlarge its horizon to benefit from the insight and analyses that are distinctly wrought by the sciences of mind. Living human experience and the possibility of transformation inherent in human experience also analysis evidently produced by the science of mind. Everyday researched, believed, theorized, perceived, and known is done so by an observer which come from previous knowledge. We need to enlarge our horizon to encompass non-Western traditions of reflection upon experience. We need to broaden our horizons to include non-Western traditions of experience reflection. Mindfulness, as defined here, is this context is to experience what one's mind is doing as it does it, to be present with one's mind. The definition of mindfulness in this situation is to be aware of what one's personal mind is doing while it happens, to be present with someone's mind. There comes a piercing realization of just how disconnected humans normally are from their overt experience. Part of which I believe is due to our disconnected from our body's introspective network of sensations. The untamed mind constantly tries to grasp some stable point in its unending movement and cling to thoughts, feelings, and concepts as if they were solid ground. Disrupt mindfulness, discover the state of just being. People often worry that were they to loosen their hold on craving and grasping, their desire would go away, and they would become numb and catatonic. In fact, exactly the reverse is the case. It is the mindless, the unaware, state of mind that is numb, swathed in a thick cocoon of wandering thoughts, prejudgments, and solipsistic ruminations. As mindfulness grows, appreciation for the components of experience grows. The point of mindfulness/awareness is not to disengage the mind from the phenomenal world, it is to enable the mind to be fully present in the world. The goal is not to avoid action but to be fully present in one's actions, so that one's behavior becomes progressively more responsive and aware. This one is bold statement. People often worry that were they to loosen their hold on craving and grasping, their desire would go away, and they would become numb and catatonic. In fact, exactly the reverse is the case. It is the mindless, the unaware, state of mind that is numb, 3/4 swathed in a thick cocoon of wandering thoughts, prejudgments, and solipsistic ruminations. As mindfulness grows, appreciation for the components of experience grows. The goal is not to avoid action but to be fully present in one's actions so that one's behavior becomes progressively more responsive and aware. We are what I have heard Peter Attia and Sam Harris talk about recently know as a conscious competence. The environment is not a structure imposed on living beings from the outside but is, In fact, the creation of those beings, the environment of the brain, is personalized or not a structure from outside. The environment is not an autonomous process but a reflection of the biology of the species. The environment is controlled by a reflection of the biology of the species / it's not even fully automatic. Just as there is no organism without an environment, so there is no environment without an organism. No environment without an organism. Freedom is not the same as living in the everyday world conditioned by ignorance and confusion, it is living and acting in the everyday world with realization. Freedom is not escape, it is transformation. Freedom of the brain is transformation which is conditioned by ignorance and confusion. You need to live with it, not go anywhere. Realization being that we do not stand on solid ground, that things incessantly arise and pass away. With being able to pin them down to a stable objective or subjective ground, affects our very life and being. The realization that we are not standing on strong footing, that things appear and pass away without being able to nail them down to a fixed objective or subjective foundation, has an impact on our very lives and being. Objects do not exist independently of conceptual schemes. In active approach, the living body is a self-producing and self-maintaining system that enacts or brings forth relevance, and that cognitive processes belong to the relational domain of the living body coupled to its environment. Meaning does not reside in the constituents per se, it resides in the complex patterns of activity that emerge from interactions of many constituents. Context is important in how people interpret and proceed with what they are doing. The idea that the brain is an information processing deceive that responds selectively to features of the environment remains the core of modern neuroscience and popular understanding. The combination of mental factors that are present makes up the character of particular moments of consciousness. We have knowledge only of our representation of the world. One of the more entrenched assumptions of our scientific heritage 3/4 that the world is independent of the knower. This is systematically wrong given that no objective observation of the world is ever made out of the context of a single or set of subjective knowers. We live in a perceiver-dependent reality. The inactive approach consists of, perception consists of common principles of lawful linkages between sensory and motor systems that explain how action can be perceptually guided in a perceiver 3/4 dependent world. Perception consists of common principles of lawful linkages between sensory and motor systems. Cognitive structures emerge from the recurrent sensoromotor patterns that enable action to be perceptually guided. 2. Sensoromotor coupling. Cognition in its most encompassing sense consists in the enactment or bringing forth both of a world by a viable history of structural coupling. One of the most fundamental cognitive activities that all organisms perform is categorization. Groundlessness. In Buddhist philosophy, groundlessness means that phenomena lack any inherent and independent being, they are said to be empty of own being. In Western philosophy, groundlessness means that knowledge and meaning lack any absolute foundation. A state of knowing not based on an observer and observed. We ought to learn how to negotiate our way through a world that is not fixed and preg-even but that is continually shaped by the types of action in which we engage. Embodied cognition is an extension of the functionally connected networks that make up the physical nervous system. The body acts as a dynamic interface enabling neural activity to generate actions that in turn lead to new sensory inputs. Embodied cognition is an extension of the physical nerve system's functionally related networks. The body serves as a dynamic interface, allowing cerebral activity to create actions, which then result in new sensory inputs. Bodily environmental linkages create dynamic couplings between otherwise distinct cognitive systems, and they become part of the internal model of each agent, an essential component of social development. Physical environmental links produce dynamic couplings between otherwise disparate cognitive systems, and they form part of each agent's internal model, an important component of social evolution. 2. The evaluation. I collected this part mostly on Goodreads 3. Some comment is very much similar to my through. So I decided to keep as is it. Francisco Varela, along with Evan Thompson and Eleanor Roche, present an assortment of middle ways, in special, between objectivism and nihilism, science and experience. Science is traditionally concerned with what is verifiable in a very peculiar way, that which is describable in words or diagrams, and that can be measured, compared, and usually reproduced. That works wonders for basically anything involving the creation of technology or the study of the natural world. But what of the mind? Highlighting the difference between descriptions, science's main output, and experience, our daily, direct experience given through our perception and mind, the authors assert that the latter has been largely, and unfortunately, ignored by Western scientific knowledge. But that is not the case for the tradition of mindfulness/awareness meditation hailing from centuries-old Buddhism. Indeed, the open-ended study and exploration of perception and consciousness is at the heart of meditation practices of many schools of Buddhism, and as the authors explain has some things in common with a few Western practices such as psychotherapy, e.g. Klein's object relations theory and, I'd say, the present-day mindfulness fad, and, especially, phenomenologists Husserl's and Merleau-Ponty's forays on systematic explorations of perception and experience. The author's declared goal is to attempt and build a bridge between these two disconnected but complementary traditions, specifically cognitive science and mindfulness/awareness. Varela builds upon his previous work with former partner Umberto Maturana, see Tree of Knowledge, and, from the perspective of cognitive science, develops a theory of mind dubbed enactivism too. Their writing is as clear as can be, and they go through the previous two waves of cognitive science explaining in detail how previous theories attempted to understand the mind, broadly, cognitivism, computationalism and connectionism, and where they fell short. Far from trying to impose an alien theory out of the blue, the authors make sure to connect their theory with then contemporary, this was the 90s, authors and developments. Enactivism is thus seen as closely related to situated cognition and embodied cognition. In doing so, the authors also take a slight detour to talk about evolution theories, which was very interesting in itself, but more importantly, makes a crucial point for considering cognitive science and evolution hand in hand. Throughout the book, however, the authors make it clear that their theory is just one piece of a larger whole. Connecting science and direct, mindful, experience is their end game, and they do so through careful analogies between mindfulness meditation and findings in cognitive science. The descriptions developed by science on the fragmentation of the mind, or should I say the self, point toward a lack of self, a lack of objective ground. Instead of following through such theories to their conclusion, namely, in the author's view, the lack of an ultimate self, philosophers and scientists do not follow their conclusions unto experience, insisting that though science and philosophy point to the inexistence of a self, humans cannot help but to cling to the illusion that we exist, that, somehow, we are something. This discovery of no ground thus often leads to nihilism, the craving for something one knows cannot be true. 3. It need not be like that. Rather, one should aim for a middle way. To concede that the self as we picture it, a messy aggregate of wills, memories, perceptions, beliefs, etc., is just that, i.e. a messy aggregate of things our minds desperately grasp to in order to feel existent, needs not lead to madness or anxiety. But on the lack of a dedicated tradition and techniques to explore such emptiness, in fact, to truly explore one's mind, Western thought has, after the fall of the old symbols of modernity, been mainly skeptical and cynical, some parts of postmodern thought, at least. Buddhism and its dedicated techniques, the authors assert, should be explored just for that. The idea of a no-self, that is, the idea that any person is just a mind grasping to that messy set of things as if they were the person itself, has been around for centuries in Buddhist thought. Entire schools of thought have been devoted to just this, reaching Nyat and beyond. Traditional Western thought, however, fixed as it is on language, words, on descriptions of experience, has mostly missed this point, analytic philosophy in special. We cling to words as if they alone can fix our grasping and our troubles, but we forget that we pre-exist words, concepts, and explanations. We do not exist in words. We are not our theories. Well, we are not, I'd say. Varela, Roche, and Thompson's The Embodied Mind is a natural step after reading Maturana and Varela's The Tree of Knowledge. It is also, in my view, a somewhat accessible introduction to the main problems and theories of cognitive science itself. It won't teach you how to meditate, you should seek an accredited teacher for that, apparently, but it will serve to show you that what roughly the other half of the world has spent centuries doing can't be waved away as religious nonsense or auto-suggestion. It is a dedicated, serious tradition aimed at truly understanding consciousness and human experience. The longer we in the West keep believing we got it all figured out because we can heal illnesses and build spaceships, simultaneously believing in stuff like law, and keep insisting that reason consists simply in laying down words carefully enough so as to make them true, the longer we'll stay blind to the true causes our differences, struggles and turmoils. Scientific research has not been entirely blind to this one, but the general public, and many academics, still needs not only to let go of such prejudices, but actively seek out alternative traditions in order to overcome its own limitations. Language and conscious thought has set us apart from other animals, but we have not transcended matter. We are still animals, but animals that are able to gain true insight and understanding of our own condition. 3 recommendation I will like to recommend this book to cognitive science and Buddhist philosopher student. Also who are interested to learn regional philosophy to brain activity. 4.